Hello, everyone, and welcome to ATL Falcons UK. This week, me and Cal are joined by Will McFadden and Tori McElhaney, who are both writers for the Falcons in different areas. Jeff Reinebold, who is obviously a coach and covers all Sky Sports and everything like that over here for us, and I'm sure you all know him off Twitter as well. And then former Falcon, who just jumped on right then, Chuck Smith. So me and Cal are pretty much going to try and get over the off-season with the Falcons a little bit of draft, and then see what the guys' takes are and everything. So, guys, thank you for coming on to start with, and I'll let Cal get off with the questions.
So, yeah, obviously we'll start with our off-season. So, obviously everyone knows our cap space literally below nothing. So, I think I just want to know everyone's opinions on. I think me and Danny have spoke about this, and everyone's mentioned it on their own Twitters. That I think we've had quite a successful one, considering how money we don't actually have. But I think we've brought in the right players. Just want to know what everyone's opinion is on that.
Go on, guys.
Someone can start. It's a free for all.
I think when you're in the Falcon situation with the cap, all right.
Go on, Jeff. You get started, and Tori, you can follow up.
I think when you're in the situation that Falcons are with the cap, then obviously you got to be really judicious about how you use your money. And I think Chuck will tell you, as a guy who played the game and was in the locker room, it's not like collecting football cards. When you bring guys into your program, you got to bring the right guy into your program, and the environment that you're trying to create in your locker room is as critical as what you put on the field. And so when you look at guys like Eric Harris, and this is not a knock at anybody that's played the position previously in Atlanta, because you had a good player there in the past. The problem was he couldn't get on the field. So availability is one of your biggest abilities, and Eric Harris is a guy that's proven he can stay on the field. He had an injury, he had an ACL at New Orleans, but he overcame that. Played every week in Oakland, that shows how old I am. But it played every week in Las Vegas. He's going to bring leadership. He's going to bring toughness. He's bringing smarts. He's a kind of guy Dean Pease can really use in the back end to solidify the back end, because if you're not on the field, you're not helping your football team. And so I think that's the kind of guys. And then they took kind of some flyers on some other guys that are low money, low risk, gets. And, if Barkevious Mingo can play, then, there you're talking about a guy who was drafted really, really high and never has really found his feet in the NFL. But if he can give him a little boost as a pass rusher, that's a huge plus for the Falcons.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, I think in the offseason, my personal thoughts, I think the Falcons went and got a lot of guys that were just fit-in guys that they hoped to get something out. I don't think they had a really, big splash, but I think part of that is, number one, is the cap, but also, man, people seem to forget. I mean, this team is promoting themselves just 2 years ago as being a Super Bowl contender. You got top picks across the board. You got, guys that need to step up. So you got people that, to me, they filled in. Mingo, he spoke on Barkevious Mingo. I'm not counting on him to really honestly help the pass rush. He's a pressure guy at best. Blitz, he's shown the ability to blitz off the ball. But as far as being a 1, 2, or 3 pass rusher on this team, he wouldn't be. Listen, if he could rush the passer, he wouldn't be in Atlanta. So the facts remain, the Falcons still need to shore that up. But in the offseason, from my standpoint, did the Falcons get better? I think they're still the same, but I don't think I think the free agent guys. Let's see. Hope we get something out of them.
Okay, that's fair enough. Tori?
Well,
Yeah, no, I was just gonna add how important it was that you got all these guys on 1-year deals, because you're not trying to push this money back into 2022, 2023. The Falcons talking about salary cap issues and the problem and the hole that they're in kind of right now. It was really important that Terry Fontenot in this offseason found guys who were veteran players who he could get at a cheap rate, who he could sign on a 1-year deal. And I think that was going to be. I think I even said back in January and February how important that was going to be and how that's what the Falcons offseason was going to look like. They weren't going to make big splashes. They weren't going to go and grab guys that were going to be difference makers immediately. They're going to find guys to build depth. And so I think when I look at what they've done since the league year started, I think it aligns with what they had the means to do. So I think all in all, every move they've made so far has made complete sense in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback off of that because I completely agree with Tori. But I think so just because they're not going to have an impact necessarily on the field to the biggest possible degree, I think that this could be really impactful in the locker room and for establishing the culture that Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot want to bring to Atlanta. You know, a guy like Duron Harmon or Mike Davis or whoever, you know, they may not be here for the long haul, but they're going to be very, very important in kind of establishing the tone and the culture that Arthur Smith and Dean Pease is going to want to have on the defensive side of the ball and all of that. So, yeah, short-term deals, they didn't have a lot of money to play with, but Terry Fontenot's, you know, throughout his career has been really good at getting those mid-level veteran free agency guys and then getting the most out of them, you know, the maybe underrated players that they bring in. And I think they've done as well a job as probably could be expected given the financial limitations at bringing in some of those guys. And I think it will be beneficial to the culture as well.
You know, guys, remember now, it's subtraction. It's addition by subtraction sometimes too. When you lose Alex Mack, you get rid of a big contract, and now you create some cap space too. So it's all the moves. It's the totality of the moves that they're making. And you know, everybody's hit on. I think a lot. They did what they could do with what they had available. And remember now, the players are betting on themselves too with these one-year deals. Because you take a guy like Harris. The cap is going to go back up next year. We're in an artificially low cap this coming season. So take a one-year deal, bet on yourself, and then when the money comes back, now you can go get your long-term deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'm not counting on any of these guys. I know we spoke of them helping the culture. If we need one-year guys to help this culture with Julio, Matt, Deion Jones, we got more issues now than we really think. I mean, see, this is to me, this is part of a little bit about what the issues have been. The guys there have to create the culture. There's nobody they brought in a free agent that will have any impact on the culture. The leaders are there. So one of the challenges with the Falcons these last few years, we talked about this culture, but what is the culture? Is it tough? Are we a running team? Are we a throwing team? Are we built on defense? The culture has to be set by the players out on his team, the guys, the Jake Matthews, all the new guys on the line. We have many first rounders. So I think what the players have to set it, Arthur Smith is just coming in to try to change the schemes and stuff. But the guys there change the culture. A coach can come in and say whatever, but the guys that are in that locker room, and we have enough of them. So I just think moving forward with this next go round, it's time to stop making excuses for all these first rounders and stars that haven't created the culture of consistent winning. But when we look at them, their draft status says they're going to be what? Leaders. So I just think that Arthur Smith, you know, with this kind of team, it's a lot of veterans. He just needs to put the best.
Sorry, I just lost connection with the mic a little bit then. I don't know if anybody else did at the same time. It's all right. But no, absolutely get where you're coming from. There are people in the dressing room that should already be embedding this culture into it. But I kind of get Jeff in the terms of the players that are coming in. A lot of them have points to prove. A lot of them have been consistent in terms of the health and things like that. And over the last couple of seasons, we have been an unhealthy side, which probably hasn't helped our development as such. But coming up, because Chuck and Jeff, because you're into coaching side of the game, is there anything that you think will be implemented with these newer players? You know, that to bring them up to speed quickly with them only being 1 year deals.
Well, I think Chuck hit on something that's really important. This has been an underachieving football team. This has been a team that's on paper should be in the playoffs. Right now, health has been a big part of it. They can't stay, particularly on defense. They couldn't stay healthy. You know, the reason Dan Quinn's not there, the reason Tom Dimitrov's not there, is because those first-round draft choices that they've had haven't played in a lot of cases like first-round draft choices need to play for you. You know, and they're in a tough division. Let's be honest with it. But the reality of it is, you know, when you come into this situation, and you know, Dan Quinn is a great guy. Dan Quinn's a guy that's, you know, he is a guy that the players, you know, he's a player's guy, right? Yeah. But in the end, Chuck said it exactly right. The people that are going to turn this thing around are not going to be people that sit in an office. They're going to be guys that put their hand in the ground and they make a decision that they're not going to be, you know, a team that underachieves anymore. And they got to make, they got to make that call. They've been all over the place on offense, right? And they've been all over the place on defense. They tried a million different things, a million different players to come in, and it hasn't worked. And they need consistency, and they need maturity, and they need guys to step up.
Yeah.
And that begins with the guys that Chuck mentioned. You know, you start talking about Matt Ryan, you start talking about Julio Jones, you know, again, those veteran guys. Defensively, it's a little bit different in my mind because you really don't have any proven guys over on that side of the ball. You got a linebacker that's a really, really good player, but that's one guy. And Grady Jarrett's got to, he's got to take control of it and say, let's go, man, let's go.
Yeah, I agree, without a doubt. Just moving on, because I'm conscious of time a little bit. In regards to the draft, is anybody looking at anything other than Falcons staying at 4th, or have you all got different takes on that? Because I'm sure it's a controversial one.
Well, I'm a big believer in, first and foremost, trying to get multiple players to fill, different needs on the team. Because, there are different things that the Falcons need. You could use another. Obviously, you need a D lineman. Obviously, you need a pass rusher. You can use another offensive lineman, be great, even a running back. So at number 4, unless it's someone that you feel is going to impact and help take you over that next hurdle, I'd like to see the Falcons consider me personally moving back, maybe trying to figure out a way to get another first round or early second round and try to fill out the roster with talented players. And but now this is me. I think Matt Ryan, me personally, I think Matt Ryan still has, upside when it comes to being good enough to help this team get far into the playoffs and even to a Super Bowl. But the only way that's going to happen, he needs a better defense. He's going to need more around him. And so when you look at it like that, I feel that. But if Justin Fields is there, I'm a big Justin Fields guy. If Justin Fields is there, I'm taking Justin Fields. And then I'm saying, guess what, Matt? We're going to let you groom this kid. But if Justin Fields is not there, I'm trading out. I'm trying to figure out a way to get an offensive lineman and try to get one of these young pass rushers towards the back of the first round or early second round.
Right, okay. Tori, do you want to drop your comment on that one? Sorry, because I just saw your eyes light up when you said Matt Ryan then, so.
I mean, I think it's really interesting because I feel like when you look at all the directions that the Falcons could go with this draft, it's so interesting because I feel like each direction they go is a different direction that this team and organization goes in the next 2 years. And I personally think that I agree. I think if Justin Fields is at number 4, they take Justin Fields. And I think if he's is there a problem?
No, you're all right with us.
Sorry,
Might
what's happening?
We can still hear you.
Can you?
Yeah.
Hold on.
It's all right.
I can't.
This is probably what happens when we're in like 3 different states and 2 different countries and everything else along the way. Will, do you want to hop in? Yeah,
I'll hop in while Tori's getting everything. Because I completely agree with you, Chuck, as far as, if they're going to trade back, I think the value, especially on the defensive side of the ball, is probably more in that mid to late first round. It kind of stinks that there's not really that like top end defensive player. I know people like Mike Parsons, but like linebacker, the Falcons that's kind of the one defensive position where they're best off right now. So I agree with Justin Fields. It sounds like that's our consensus here is like if he's still on the board at 4, that's the quarterback that we all apparently like. Jeff, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I have been thinking lately because, the Falcons have been picking, 16 the past couple of years. They've been in the 20s. They've sometimes, everybody owns like a few like nice, good things, but we all know the one shirt in our closet that is really expensive and you take extra care of it because you spend a lot for it, or it makes you feel good to put on this pair of shoes because, they're just the best pair of shoes that you have. And I'm kind of like, the Falcons haven't been in the top 5 in a long time. I kind of just want to take a player who has elite all-pro potential, and I do kind of feel like that's Kyle Pitts. And so, while yes, it makes sense to rationalize and sit there and say the draft's a crapshoot, the best approach to take is probably just to get as many picks, have as much ammo, fill out the roster in as many different ways. But then there is that one part of me that's just kind of, man, it would be really fun to have somebody like Kyle Pitts or Justin Fields or Jamar Chase or whoever in this offense. Like that would just be fun to watch, even though I know that doesn't necessarily make sense. So Chuck, I think I do agree with you. Unless they love a guy there at 4 and that their scouting and their research has said, this is the right pick. We believe, that he's going to develop into a future all-pro, Pro Bowler, what have you. Yeah, probably trading back and getting more ammo is the smartest thing to do, but they also need to know and have a plan in mind to put into action with what they want to do when they trade back. Where do they want to trade back? Where's the value? Do they want to try to get 2022 picks when they're able to scout and do stuff more regularly? Do they want a lot of 2021 picks because they don't have the financial ability to really fill out the roster through free agency? Like there's a lot of stuff that comes into play even when you talk about trading back.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree. It's interesting when you talk about a pick at that high, right? You're talking about the 4th pick in the draft. You're talking about that guy's. You got to project that guy as being a gold jacket guy, a guy that's going to be a Hall of Fame player. Now, who do you have in the draft that may be available at 4 that is that guy? You look at the defensive board, and I'm really interested to hear Chuck's take on this because he watches these guys and works with these guys. Barmore is the best, in my opinion, the best inside defensive. I don't think it's a great inside defensive class, right? And then you look at the edge guys, and I like Phillips and Russo both from Miami, but both of them have issues. One's got an injury issue, and the other is really raw and hasn't played a lot of football yet. Now he is an amazing chunk of clay, but he hasn't played an awful lot of football in his life yet. And so Twitty Paye, I don't think is that guy. I don't think he's a Hall of Fame player. I don't think he's a good player. I don't know, Chuck, who do you see on defense that you'd say he's worth the 4th pick? Because value, it is not. The history will tell you that, the draft is about a 50-50 proposition, right? So obviously the more picks you have, the more chances you have to hit right. And that's what I think I think that's one of the things the Falcons got to look at. But I'm interested to hear Chuck's take on these pass rushers.
Well, I think the 2 you talked about from Miami are good pass rushers. I think Payne is a developing, effort guy. But me personally, to me, a lot of the value of all these pass rushers, the guys that are in the 1st round, they're guys that are comparable going to be in the 2nd round. And so when you look at some of the guys that, you have an opportunity to get at 4, that's why I really believe, again, if that quarterback's there, I'm trading both of those. I'm trading and trying to get maybe 1 or 2 of those guys or get the cornerback because it's a deep draft for cornerbacks also. But, as far as the pass rushers are concerned, look, it's rare you get a pass rusher that comes in the NFL and becomes a 10-sack guy like Von Miller or right off the bat or a guy like a Derek Thomas years ago who gets 10 sacks. A lot of this has to be the right fit and right fit with the development. Because when you look at a good example of, you look at Jadeveon Clowney when he went to Houston, Jadeveon played a 4-3 defensive end in college and everybody stood him up. So people keep wondering, why is Jadeveon always struggle to get sacks? Well, maybe he should be in the 4-3, but no one's ever given the opportunity to play in the 4-3 because that'd be better for him. So a lot of the fit has to be right for the Falcons. But at number 4, listen, again, if Fields is not there, I'm trading back. I'm trying to get a cornerback, and I'm trying to get a safety, but I don't know if there's one, late in the draft. But there's a lot of pass rushers. I'm gonna tell you, if the Falcons could get Cam Sample from Tulane, he's a beast. Great effort.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's so many different guys out there. Maybe in the third round, get Quincy Roche. Pull it. So there's so many. Pat Jones, kid out of Pitt, might be there. So listen, there is not much a difference.
Good players.
Trying, but those guys the guys that everybody that you have consensus that are in the top first round this year in the NFL as far as defensive linemen, there are guys that are just as good in the second round that are comparable. That really, so this is one of those years where in the first and the second round is going to have so much value. Even in the third round, when you look at some of the guys that have come out of the third round, I can think of Yannick Ngakoue, Max Crosby. I can go on and on and on down the list. So this first round, the guys in the second round, there's not a big separation in talent from the first round past edge rushers than the second round. Some of them might be a little more polished, some might be a little quicker, but as far as production and me projecting them in the NFL, it's really comparable.
And it's the thing to remember too about this draft, because guys, with five quarterbacks, right, potentially going in the first round, and quarterbacks always go before they should because it's the nature of the position. That's going to shove those players, those good players that Chuck's talking about, that's going to shove those players even further down. So there's going to be a deeper pool available in the second and third rounds than you normally see.
When it comes to the pass rushers, Chuck, because of the defensive transition that's going to take place under Dean Pease, what do you know about Dean Pease's defensive fronts, and how could that impact? Because, if you're sitting here looking at a guy in kind of a 4-3, maybe a wide 9 type of role, I don't necessarily think that's what we're going to get from Dean Pease. So there may be a different type of player that fans need to be looking at for this defense. What do you know about Dean Pease's defensive front?
Well, I've had a chance to watch Dean and respect his work over the years, but I think Dean is going to be running 3-man fronts, a lot of pressure. I think he's going to show 4-man fronts, but I think what you get in Dean Pease is being a prodigy and one of those guys who worked under Rex Ryan. I think what you're going to see is what Green Bay did last year with Mike Pettin. I think you're going to see fire zones. You're going to see Deion Jones blitzing. You're going to see the corners are going to have to be able to lock down. You're going to see Grady Jarrett being, they're going to put him all different places along the front. I just think it's going to be pressure based. I think like Dante Fowler, he's going to be basically a stand-up guy again, and I think that's why they need to fill that 3-4. But I think that's going to be the base. You're going to see a lot of fire zones, a lot of pressure. And looking at where the Falcons were when it comes to pass rushing and looking at their production, it now works perfect because they are underdeveloped as a team when it came to the production of their sacks. So I think in this day and time, you got to pick your poison. Either I'm going to sit back in the cover 2, cover 3 zone the last 5 years and be one of the worst in the league, or do I take some calculated risks like you see a lot of the Pittsburghs and teams that will go with a 3-man front and get after it. So I just think he's going to show multi-fronts, but I think it's going to be based out of a 3-man front, and they're going to send a lot of pressure to try to get after these quarterbacks.
I think that's, well, if I want to move on to mine or even Danny's opinion. I think we've changed. I was always with Chuck and trading down and taking a defensive player. But I think when you mentioned if Fields is there, I don't think you can pass on him. I don't think he's a person you do pass on. But then in the last couple of weeks, then Pitts has came into it. Then literally, I think before last month, we didn't hear nothing. And then a lot of rumours came from taking him, which it would obviously, you'd improve your offense. It'd be one of the best. But then I would still be trading down. I still want more picks. Like you said, I think this is what a lot of people are thinking about was him. Everyone thinks first round, that's your only man, but we've got 7 rounds, like you said, second, third, fourth round. You can pick absolute gems up in all of them, and I think that's what people are just concentrating on the first round. That's the most important. Maybe it's obviously it's slightly more important because it's your 4th pick, it's your first pick. But like you said, second, third round, we can pick some gems up, and I think the team, Smith and Terry, will hopefully pick the right guys.
Yeah, and they're at 4 in each of these rounds, which is another thing to consider. Is yes, the best teams build and win on day 2 and then day 3, where they're able to develop those guys into starting caliber players. But there's a big difference in picking 24th in the 2nd or 3rd round and picking 4th. So yes, the Falcons will have opportunities to add some of these guys that Chuck was mentioning, where the value is probably back into the 1st, early 2nd. You have somebody who slips because 5 quarterbacks go into the 1st round and all of a sudden is there. You can grab them right at the top of the 2nd round instead of being in the middle of the 2nd round. So that's a huge benefit for Atlanta this year as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a question there just in the comment on the screen. If probably Chuck and Jeff, I don't know, and Will, your knowledge will probably cover it as well, but pretty specific.
Yeah. And I think, remember, they're not going to be in a true old school base 3-4. They're going to be lined up. They're going to have components of a 4-man front, because Dante Fowler is going to be that guy when they go 3-man front. He'll come up and make a 4-man front. But I see we're talking about, I guess it's Tadero Slayton. Listen, if I got the nose guard for you. If you want to find him probably a little bit later, I'm going with God, I'm having a brain.
It's screen pressure. Hold
up. Jalen Twyman as a true nose guard. If you're going to go into 3-4, it's about 3'10". He can give you some pass rush. To me, I think he fits good for the Falcons, where you would, looking at him. But, man, I want to just say this before I go. And I know the cliche, we always say that, we know there's no way to predict who's going to do what. And when it comes to this draft, I think a lot of what we got to remember, guys, when you go to a certain team, coaching has to be held accountable also. Yeah. So if you go to a team, and let's look at it now, NFL coaches get fired and rehired. So clearly there's some coaches that weren't good at their last job. So a lot of in this draft, what no one talks about, you got to look at how the fit works with the players and the coaches, and not just the scheme. Because so many players get to places, and like I said, they're not developed. So to me, the biggest thing is, I'm going to leave you guys with this: the Falcons. As much as we blow up, as much as we talk about Vic Beasley, talk about Tack, we talk about all this negativity, but we never held the position coaches and other guys accountable. Teaching matters. So my biggest thing I want to get across to our viewers here is that the biggest thing, when you get the players, now what's next? The development does not stop after the draft. You're not going to draft a guy that necessarily comes in like Aaron Donald. So there's got to be a development phase. So me now with Fontenot and our new coach, I want to see what these new assistants do, because the head coach is not the one who's developing these players. It's the defensive assistants. And I think that's the biggest thing that affected the Falcons draft picks over this last 5-6 years, is the assistant coaches didn't get the job done, and that subsequently got Dan Quinn fired. So this draft, hopefully the development's there when they get the guys. So I appreciate you guys, man. I got to run.
I love it. Thank you very much for coming on. Awesome.
Okay, guys. Sorry I got to run, but I'll talk to you guys soon.
Don't worry.
Thank you.
Speak to you after the draft.
Take care, Chuck.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Jeff, what we'll actually let you do, just because that comment was off the back of coaching, I'll let you jump in if you have anything to say on that one, because I know you've coached yourself and you coach yourself. So,
yeah, obviously, again, coaches are held responsible because they get fired, right? And this is production. It's a production-oriented business, right? And that's the way it is. And it's the thing that Chuck said that I think is really true is that it's what you do with the player once you've drafted the player, right? And there's a relationship that has to develop where the player has to want to get better. And this is part of the draft. This is part of why the draft is so tough, right? Does the player, will you put $1 million in his pocket? How's that going to change that player? Is he still going to have that desire to be great? Is he still going to, does it matter, right? Does he really love football? Look at what happened with the #1 draft pick last year for the Titans, the kid out of Georgia, the offensive line. Guys, he played 4 plays as a rookie, and they cut him. 4. He went to Miami, and they cut him before he ever stepped on the field, right?
Yeah.
Now, somebody really made a bad – somebody should be held accountable for that because that player didn't all of a sudden – I mean, you got to – that's why you got to really work at the draft, and you got to really know what you're getting. And sometimes you'll give up if you're smart, and the Patriots have proven this. You'll give up a little in the, quote, measurables to get the guy who can process the information, because the information that they get thrown at them compared to what they had in college football it's not even in the same ballpark, right? That can deal with the pressure of playing in the National Football League, because it's not even. Coach Vermeil told us this in Kansas City, and the night before we played Washington, the first preseason game in 2000, he kept all the rookies back and he said, "Men, I'm just going to tell you, right? You played college football at some great places, but boys play college football on Saturday afternoon. Men play NFL football on Sunday afternoon, and there's a huge difference." And I thought it was him just trying to get the guys ready to play, right? Yeah. But I have the first play of the game the next morning, right? We go out and play Washington. LeVar Arrington's playing outside linebacker at Washington, and Priest Holmes is our running back. Trent Green looks down the field, drops the ball off to a Priest, and I mean to tell you, and LeVar Arrington is a big man. And he got to Priest so fast, and the collision was the noise of that collision was like, holy shit, right? You can't really, until you go through it, you can't appreciate the jump that it is for these guys, right? And now what's really, really, really interesting in this draft, because of COVID and because of the players' ability, right? We're looking at drafting guys, and we talked about Rousseau. We're looking at drafting guys in the first round who may have played 20 college football games. Yeah. 20 college football games. All right. So you think about it in terms of he plays 60 plays a game, which they don't, right? But just do the math, right? Yeah. These guys have played some of them less than 500 plays that you have to evaluate the player on, and you're now saying that guy's a first round pick, and we're going to make that investment, and we're going to give that guy that much money. Think about how bad it is when you miss on a first round guy. Ask the Jets, right? How much it sets your program back. So you better, if you're going to take that guy at 4, he better be a guy that can be productive for you right now.
Yeah, and for all of those reasons that Jeff just pointed out, I mean, the development aspect of all of this is going to be critical. Taking the guy and then meeting that like relevant upside that you see in him and helping him get there, because Dan Quinn used to always say that a player's biggest areas of growth happen from year 1 to year 2, and then year 2 to year 3. Yeah. And I think Chuck was right and Jeff is right in that there were a lot of areas where the Falcons didn't develop to the level that they needed to. And you look at the best assistant coaches that were on the staff the past, 4 or 5 seasons were Jeff Holbrick, linebackers. I mean, the Falcons just always had at least a good linebacker. And then they developed a player like Foye into a really solid starting NFL linebacker. Oh, yeah. And then Raheem Morris and, what he did. And this is like kind of what you need to know about assistant coaching is the position matters for some, but a lot of places, they just want a really good coach and they understand and they learn football. And moving a guy like Raheem Morris over to wide receivers is because he was able to command attention in a room with Mohamed Sanu, with Julio Jones, with Calvin Ridley. I mean, it was just his personality was a perfect fit for that room, and it panned out, because you kind of had Julio who could really help and teach more of the technical aspects of the position. And one of my favorite things was just watching him be hands-on with the other players, Falcons receivers. But then they moved Raheem Morris back to defense, and immediately you kind of saw at least a little bit more cohesion in the secondary. But another aspect where assistant coaches can play a big role is it was Dave Brock who, as the wide receivers coach, came to Dan Quinn and came to Dirk Cutter and basically said, I think Russell Gage can be more than just a special teams player or gadget player for this offense. And he was the one really that advocated for Russ to step in as that third wide receiver. And it's so far proven to be the right choice. So your assistant coaches have such a big role in developing the players, but they also need to kind of not be scouts, but like keep their eye open and be imaginative, because they know the players and their skill sets better than the head coach does. The head coach is relying on that information from his assistants a lot of time because they're dealing with everything else, the game planning, what do we need to do? And so, yeah, like Jeff's point, Chuck's point, exactly spot on, because there's going to be less information about this draft class than any previously.
Yeah.
So they're going to need to get these guys in there who they believe they can develop, but then actually developing them will be crucial to getting the most out of this draft. You don't want to waste the opportunity that they have here, and that's going to rely on all of the assistant coaches for this new regime maximizing this player's talent.
Yeah, absolutely. DMPs, drastically positive. Fair point. Just coming off the back of all of that, and
I think one of the guys you had in Atlanta that did a great job in the past as was Jeff Ulbrich, because I think Jeff, you watched when Jeff took over the defense, you watched that defense changed right away. He brought that energy, that toughness that was really lacking in Atlanta's defense. Like I said, I like Dan Quinn, but I'm going to tell you something. You go back even to the Super Bowl team, that was not a nasty physical defense. It was a fast defense that ran around. But, they have not been – the knock on the Falcons defensively is they're not tough. They're not physical. And that's – that's a mindset, but it's also it's a set of demands that are laid out and that are from the top on down, that this is what we're going to be. And I think Dean Pease will do a good job with that and toughening up that, firming up that Falcon defense. Because if they can play a little bit of defense, I mean, they don't got to be a top 10 defense, but they can play a little bit of defense, then they got a chance to be a really good football team, because that offense is going to score points.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, this is the thing. Go on, Cal.
No, yeah, I think Danny's going to say the same thing. We've said we've got a top 10 offense. Matt Ryan can throw it. If we like Mike has come in running back wise, if our running game improves, our offense instantly improves more and more. Then if you even, I can't remember what it was on defense last year, 28th, 29th, probably 30th. So even if you drop that by 12 places, you come like 18th, 19th. That's an extra, you could say, a couple of wins or even more than that, because I worked out, I think it was 8 games last year where we only lost by 1 score, and a lot of it was the defensive part of it, and also the offense, because we couldn't run the ball at all, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got one question there. It's quite a broad one. How many starters do you think we can or probably get in the draft? Honestly, that's dependent on
running the ball is
Go on, Jeff.
Running the ball is 2 things. It's number one, it's attitude, and it's commitment to run the football, right?
Yeah.
Because they've got some. Look at that offensive line. At one point, I think they could put 5 first-rounders on the field. Like, who's ever been able to do that? And they didn't run the ball because they wouldn't commit to running the football. And the defense was so bad that they were constantly behind, and then they didn't have the opportunity to really sit in there and run it, because you got to run it to be able to run it well. So a number of things that play into this. The other thing that people don't talk about ever, and it is a undervalued part of the game now, but Falcons special teams were not very good. They lost games last year, and talk about the Dallas one to start with, because they were horrendous in the kicking game. And some of that is the fact that play happened is incredible to me in the National Football League. They look completely unprepared. And that's, again, what does that go back to? It goes back to preparation and coaching. And so if they can get the special teams better and, look for guys, there are values guys in this draft. There's a linebacker named Bolton from Missouri that's going to be probably a 3rd or 4th round guy. That's not 6'2", and he's not 4'4", and he's not, but put the tape on in the SEC, and he is a violent, not a tough guy. He's a violent football player. And then all you need to do is get a couple of those kinds of guys, and the whole equation changes on these. Yeah. Take J.C. Horn, that corner. Man, I'd love to get that guy. You know, his dad Joe played in the CFL. His dad Joe made the jump from Mississippi Junior College to the CFL, then to the Saints and all that. And JC has exactly his father's personality. He believes he's the best guy on the field and that nobody can beat him. And he is a nasty guy, right? You may say Surtain's a safer pick, and he might be, but I'll tell you what, give me the upside of JC Horn, because he's going to, again, we're going to start to develop a swagger when you start developing those kinds of guys on your football team.
Yeah. I think that's something the Falcons have been lacking over the last few years as well. We've not had boisterous personalities. We've had bold characters. We've had obviously you've got your leaders in there. You've got your Matt Ryans, your Julios, and your Grady Jarretts, but we've not had anyone that's the fine line between cocky and arrogance. And I think you do need a few of those to boost everyone else on. And that's kind of what we saw in Marlon Davidson pre-draft last year, but we never really got the opportunity to see him. And that's the kind of personality that I'd like to see us bring a few more in of, without it upsetting the dressing room too much.
It is a fairly quiet locker room. You know, the guys that you mentioned, the leaders that Chuck said needed to be the ones to establish the culture. I mean, I will never say a bad thing, nor should anybody, about Matt Ryan, because his work ethic is incredible. Out there on the field, he handles his business. He's doing, you know, conditioning drills when he's not out there running the offense during the preseason or training camp. I mean, and same with Julio Jones. I mean, they handle their business, but they're not necessarily the most vocal of leaders. And same with Grady Jarrett, and kind of same with Deion Jones. And, you know, they've got a lot of guys in that locker room who are, it's a very friendly locker room. I mean, there's great camaraderie and everything, but I don't know if there is that kind of outsized personality or just magnetic force that draws everybody together when they need to. It is more of a, hey, go about your business, conduct your business. We're trusting you, but there's a little bit less of like, I'm going to pull you along whether you want to or not. You know, when Dan Quinn said Vic Beasley's either going to love me or hate me, that was like the only time that I can remember somebody saying something like that. And I do think that the locker room needs a little bit more of that mentality, and maybe they can find it in this draft. I mean, Jeff's point spot on. Go get the dogs. You know, go get just some badass guys who want to go to battle. Yeah,
that goes back to the point that you both made earlier on in regards to money. You want the people that are doing it for the ball and not for the financial element that's going to benefit their lives later on. You want people that are there primarily to play football and make a point to everyone that what they can do. But there's definitely names in there. There's definitely names in the draft. It's just, I think I'm hopeful that Terry Fontenot and the rest of his team are able to pull them personalities this time around, because we've not always had the look in the last couple of drafts. I'm not disrespecting Caleb McGarry or McGarry or anyone like that, but nobody seems to be outspoken and really vocal as of yet.
Caleb's actually one of the more outspoken guys.
See, we don't see this.
No, Caleb's a riot. He's really good.
Awesome.
See, I think you're really cautious about, you know, it's a fine line between what you see on the sideline when guys are screaming and yelling, getting themselves ready to play. You know, that lasts about 30 seconds. When you go on the field and you're getting your ass kicked, right? And you're getting your ass kicked, all that stuff's out the window, right? You got to find guys that go out and kick somebody's ass, right? And you find those guys on tape. And this is where, because the players are so sophisticated now. They've been prepped for the draft for so long, for the OTAs, not for the OTAs, for the combine, for the Senior Bowl, for all these interviews. They go through hundreds of mock interviews with their agents. The agents tell them what to say, you know. And so you've really got to dig, and you got to do a great job on what is it, right? What is it that this makes this kid's motor run? And when you watch him on tape, that's why I say you take a guy like Bolton. He's not going to win the underwear Olympics. He ain't, right? But I'm going to tell you something. Watch him play. And when he blows guys up, against everybody, right? Yeah. Against everybody. Then I say, I want that. I want some of that on my football team. Now, you got to have the high-end athlete too. But you have to have enough, to use Will's term, you got to have enough dogs or you're just going to get your ass kicked. It is a nasty game, right?
Yeah.
And it's for, you look at the teams that consistently win. Find me one that's not a physical football team. That win the ultimate game, right? They're all physical. Even the Chiefs, because of the nature of their offense, they get labeled as a finesse team. They're not a finesse football team. They're a tough ass physical football team. And the ones that aren't, and the Falcons have not been, frankly, and that's why they've struggled. But if they get the toughness thing going, I think they've got a great chance, because guys, they've got some players. It's not you're not the New York Jets. You're not, the Houston Texans. You got players at that place.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the toughest version of the Falcons that we saw under Dan Quinn, I think, was actually the 2017 season. I know the Super Bowl run happened in 2016, but in 2017 they actually became more of a complete team. And the defense is what really got them into the playoffs. And you started to see people like, Keanu Neal really take the next step as not just a key player on the defense, but a leader on the defense, a tone setter on the defense. And then the injuries that happened the past couple of years really, I think, there was a chance for 2018, I think, to be the peak pinnacle of this Falcons core and roster. And just to kind of have the spine of the defense ripped out during the first 2 games was, if there's a sliding doors moment for this franchise, I think it's the first month of the 2018 season. Because I do think that everybody was starting to gel at the right time, but that's how fickle a team identity can be in the NFL. And so you've got to have players who persevere through those tough times and make the team as a collective unit a tougher identity, as a whole. And that just didn't happen in Atlanta the past few years.
And it's when you look at Keanu Neal, and I agree with Will 1,000%. There was a guy who had the chance, had he been able to stay healthy, to be the guy who sets the tone on that defensive side of the football, which will again affect the offense. But you can't do it when you're on the sideline. You can't do it when you're in the on injured reserve. You got to do it on the field, and so. It's one of the reasons why we're having these conversations about the 4th round draft pick, because of what happened to key guys in that Falcon defense a couple of years ago.
And to bring Jeff's point actually about Jeff Ulbrich kind of full circle, is one of the things that I really remember him telling me when we talked this past season was once he took over as defensive coordinator, he basically put Keanu Neal in charge of what they called the kill zone, which was, hey, don't worry, you're not really worried too much about the deep coverage. That's not your skill set. We want you to roam the middle of the field, 5 yards to 12 yards. Anybody that catches a shallow crosser, anybody that catches, a curl route in the middle of the field, your job is to light them up and be a missile. And that's what Keanu Neal does better than 98% of people in the NFL. And Jeff Ulbrich just said, okay, we're just going to have you do this. We're not going to confuse you. We're not going to do too many different things. No bells and whistles. You just see ball, hit ball, fly downfield, and do the thing that you do better than anybody else. And so that's, again, an example of coaches putting players in position to succeed. And we're going to have to see if this coaching staff can do that.
Yeah, agreed. We've just got one question in the comments that I don't know if you both want to cover. I know, Jeff, you've had Harris on your own show as well, so I don't know whether you're going to root for him as the most impact player to join us in the off season. But
I don't think Eric. When you talk about Eric, I mean Eric's Eric, right? He's going to be a consistent, every down, give you effort. Be in the right place. He'll make the play. I mean, the guy had 2 picks in a game and one back should have had 2 for pick sixes in the game last year. He's going to make his plays, right? But he's not going to be a dominant player for you. He's going to be a guy you can rely on. He's going to be consistent. He's going to be he's going to be a great guy in the locker. All those things, right? But he's not a Pro Bowl player, in my opinion, right? But you can't, again. Like I say this so many times, sometimes I even get tired of hearing it myself. It's not like collecting football cards. It's not like collecting football cards. Ask Dan Snyder how that works, right? Because he's been trying to do that in Washington for 25 years, right?
Yeah.
And they go out and they get all these splash free agent signings and all this, and they're a mess. They're a mess of a football team. Well, there's a reason. There's a reason for that, right? Part of it is the structure that they had in Washington, and part of it is you just say, okay, well, let's bring in Bruce Smith. He's going to be a Hall of Famer one day. Well, he was at the end of his career, couldn't play anymore, and you kept him around because you liked having Bruce Smith in your locker room. Well, that's your choice as the owner. Do you want to win, or do you want to have a bunch of guys that you like, taking your friends down into the locker room saying, this is Bruce Smith, right?
Yeah.
I feel for Arthur Blank because I think Arthur Blank really wants to win in Atlanta. And I think when he came out this year and he said everybody is on the block, that was a big step for the Falcons because there has to be that sense of urgency for everybody, right? If you look at the Patriots, guys, and I mean, you got to look at them because they're the benchmark. Do you think it's comfortable working in that building?
No.
You think it's comfortable playing on? All the kids I coached that have played for New England, they said, was it fun? Nope. The winning was fun, but the work wasn't fun. The meetings weren't fun. The pressure wasn't fun. Belichick wasn't fun, right? Now, that's one way to win. But I think if you look at time and you look at, there has to be a sense of urgency. There has to be, your job's on the line every day. Every day. I think that's my personal view because you could be a guy with ping pong table in the locker room and guys are singing Kumbaya and all that other shit. And most of the times, those are the teams that get beat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I don't think people need to necessarily come to work feeling like there's a sort of Damocles hanging over their head 24/7. But Jeff's absolutely right, is that there's the most uncomfortable place to be is in a football building during a losing streak. Because everybody's aware of just how serious the situation is, but you don't want to let it get that far. The pressure needs to start from day one so that doesn't happen. The pressure needs to be put on from training camp, from OTAs. Everybody needs to understand what's at stake. And then, in New England, they go full pads and tackle during the week at practice. There aren't that many teams that do that so frequently because everybody's now hearing about rest and recovery and the importance of just getting the mental reps and things like that. But that does then take away kind of that inherent toughness of a team. When you become more mental, it just kind of becomes a little less physical. And you need that physicality, which is why I think to the question that was posed before this kind of the topic, I think Mike Davis, I like him as maybe a player who can make an impact right out of the gate. He's a veteran, knows what to do. He's a little bit of a different back than the Falcons have had over recent years. I mean, probably closer to like Brian Hill, but still a different sort of skill set to what that brings. And I think the opportunity is going to be there for Mike Davis. I like his fit in this offense and kind of the offensive scheme because he's versatile enough to do it all. I still think Falcons could probably add one more back in the draft, and maybe that changes the answer. But the defensive stuff is going to be weird because there's going to be a little bit of a transition, and I think it's more of a multi-year kind of transition to where Dean Pease really, really wants this to be when all is said and done. So I would look at kind of Mike Davis as maybe my like Cordarrelle Patterson, those two guys.
Yeah, I was going to mention Patterson because I think when Jeff mentioned our special teams and obviously what happened in the Dallas game, but basically our punt return over the last couple of years has been non-existent for me. It's not not really gaining anything every game basically. So even if you gain an extra 10 yards, and if he scores 2 touchdowns a year, or even 1 touchdown, or even gets an extra 10, 15 yards, it's instantly putting Matt Ryan in a better position on the field. And I think he's going to be a big signing for this year. And I think the team he was at before, was it the Bears? It was the Bears before, and we spoke to a few of their fans, and they was pretty pissed off basically that they let him go. So I think it's our benefit, and I think he's going to be sort of an underrated signing for me.
Yeah. I think he outscored. I think he outran all of anyone that did any punt returning for us last year on his own, didn't he? Looking at the stats, I'm pretty sure we returned something like 790 or something along those lines, and then he on his own he was like over 1,000, which is awesome. So it's not too shabby at all. Just conscious of time a little bit, guys. So I know it's very early to be asking this because we've not had the draft yet, and there's a long way before the season goes. But can I ask for your early expectations of the Falcons, like as we stand?
You want to go first, Jeff?
As you stand right now?
Yeah,
I'll go
whatever.
first. I think it's really going to be interesting to see. I think the Falcons are. And when we covered them on Inside the Huddle for Sky Sports, we did the State of the Franchise. I made this statement. I still believe it. I think this is a team that could win anywhere from 6 to 10 games. Just depends on how healthy they're able to stay, and what kind of production and how easy they're able to transition into the new offense and defensive schemes they're going to have. How well they can amalgamate their football team. I'm worried about this, and this may be coaching paranoia or whatever, but with all of this movement that you see right now amongst the Players Association about not going into voluntary mini camps, not going into voluntary workouts, right? It makes it tougher on teams like the Falcons that are trying to establish a new way of doing things, because the longer it takes for them to get in, the harder it is going to be to create that environment that I'm sure Arthur Smith wants to create for his football team. So I think it's incumbent, and I think you saw this a little bit with the Broncos. I think it's incumbent on the leaders with the Falcons. They got to say, hey, guys, we need to be in there. Matt Ryan, you want to go back to the Super Bowl? Your best chance to get back to the Super Bowl is get in the building and start building your football team, and not, that to me is an alarming trend for teams like Atlanta. Other teams, I think, could weather it a little better. But for teams like Atlanta, they need to get in and they need to get to work.
Yeah, and I mean, we saw that a little bit last year. Like, that was the talking point with a lot of new, like the Panthers, the Buccaneers. All that. How is the pandemic gonna impact their ability to really put things? And we saw positive examples of teams that were able to do that well, and we saw examples of teams that struggled at doing just that. But I think that, again, and we've talked about it, like on paper, this team can have success. And even on the field, the past couple of years, I mean, they took Kansas City right down to the wire, should have won that game. They beat San Francisco 2 years ago on the road, a really, really good San Francisco team that went to the Super Bowl. So this is still a talented team. I guess my biggest question is, I think we'll figure out really how good Arthur Smith is as a play caller and a coordinator, because the best part of this team is still the offense, and that's always been the case. So the path to 10 wins for me, as Jeff mentioned, is this offense needs to once again emerge as one of the kind of elite units in the NFL, and I don't think it's been there the past couple of years, but it certainly has the ability to do that. And then you guys mentioned the one-loss games. And there's a little bit of a fallacy to that, because the NFL is basically specifically designed to have games end in one-possession games. But you do see year-over-year teams kind of flip their one-score records, and then they turn their season around one year to the next. I mean, that happens a lot, where a team goes 2-6 one year in one-score games, and then the next year is 5-2. And it's kind of like, oh, all right, that's the difference between a 7-9 record or a 12-4 record. And I think the Falcons could benefit from things like that. So I'm cautiously optimistic that there will be some bounce back for this team. I don't know if it will be enough to get them into the playoffs, because this is still going to be a hard division. You still are going to have Tampa Bay, and I think Carolina is going to be a lot better next year. New Orleans is still a talented group, even though there's been a mass exodus of players as they try to get under the salary cap. So I think Jeff is spot on in that 6 to 10 win range.
Yeah, I'll take that. I mean, for myself and Cal, we're just going to see a winning season, because we've really not seen one yet, and that's how painful it is. We've not been good luck for the Falcons at all in the last handful of years. So I'll take any amount of wins as long as it's more than our losses.
You guys are fitting in already.
Already used to it.
Love it.
But I think it's one for the fans that I don't think there's massive expectations, which is you obviously have some fans that are just like, oh, we've got to make the playoffs, etc. But it is a new regime, it is a new start. We do have the offense is quite similar still, and we know what they can do. Obviously, the D side of the ball needs to improve, but it is a new start. And I think if we see tweaks and we see stuff happening, and we end up on obviously 17 games this year, and it's sort of like 8 and 9, or even like 7 and 10. But you see good improvements. I think the fan base will get behind them, and I think that is the main thing. But I think the main thing on draft night for me is our fan base is going to be arguing, exploding, and it's just going to be no one's going to be agreeing with each other, and we're just ready for it.
which is stupid, because if anything, there's no bad option here for Atlanta. I think everybody should just be happy on draft night, because you're either going to land a player who, and only time will tell if this appears to be the case, but as we're sitting here right now on draft night, it's now the 5th pick. Falcons have made their selection or decide to trade back. Those are all great options to have. You've either got a quarterback for the future to build around, you get a generational offensive talent, or you trade back and maybe you grab another first-round pick. I mean, there's not a bad option in that bunch. So
I agree.
There's going to be plenty of days to worry and hand-wring ahead. Let's just enjoy this gift that came from a really bad season.
I love it. On that note, I think we'll call it a night, because we've covered much more than we intended in the first place, which is awesome. So thank you both for coming on, because it's been great to get so many different viewpoints from yourself and Chuck and Tori as well. So we will be back on draft night live. I am actually getting up for it, even though it's like 1:30 in the morning over here. So we're going to do a live watch along. So if anybody, Jeff, I presume you're working for it, aren't you? I believe you're coming back over to the UK soon for Sky Sports again. So
yeah. We're going to do it. We're going to do it virtually. We're not going to do it live, but we are going to do the draft. So yeah, I'll be working. But I might just cut in every once in a while, see how you guys are doing. I can't wait to see the reaction. Like Will's saying, I can't wait to see the reaction after that pick's made, because it's going to really tell an awful lot. I think it's going to tell an awful lot about the direction that the franchise wants to go. Whether they feel they're still in a Super Bowl window, or whether they feel they've got to build.
Yeah. I agree.
I think if you do drop in, it'll be all positivity. We're all positive on this side of the pond.
I love it. But no, that'll do for us, guys. Thank you everyone for watching live, and thank you both for jumping on. Hopefully we get to speak to you both again soon, maybe just after the draft or during, or something along those lines. But everybody keep safe, and we will be back on Monday with our first and last mock draft one, because those shows are long, so we're only doing one. But thank you for everyone watching live, and we're going to call it a night now. So see you later.
Thanks everyone. Thank you.